Okay. So we'll start with a quick recap from the beginning. In general, we're learning Living Jewish, which tells us how to live as a Jew. And we're following the order of the morning from when we wake up, we wash our hands, we get how we get dressed as a Jew, and follow through the day. Once we're ready to get our day started, we've ensured there's a clean environment. Then we move on to the idea of blessings in general and what to bear in mind, the holiness of blessing and the holiness of Hashem's name. And then we went through the actual morning blessings and how it's an opportunity to be grateful to Hashem for all the gifts that he gives us on a daily basis. And after that, the first thing we should do is daven. Okay, so now we're getting ready to daven. So we spoke about the laws of tzitzis. Tzitzis is not just a small garment the person wears under their clothes, but tzitzis also refers to the larger garment that a person uses to daven. And we learned all about that. And now we are ready to put on our tefillin. So we started with the importance of tefillin, how we have the name of Hashem upon us when we wear the tefillin, and the importance of having kosher tefillin, high quality tefillin, maintaining our tefillin, the rewards, which we said was longevity, for being careful with the mitzvah of tefillin, and how it is a sign of Hashem upon us. That was kind of the introductory paragraph. And then in section number 2, we moved on to when is the earliest time we can put on tefillin. We said it's around 6 o'clock these days in Johannesburg. It's about 40 minutes before sunrise, 30 to 40 minutes before sunrise. It's from when you could notice your friend from the distance. And we said that when you are getting ready to daven, first you put on your talis and then your tefillin. And the reason for that is because since we wear our talis more often than our tefillin, because our talis is also worn on Shabbos and Yom Tov, as opposed to our tefillin, therefore, it gets precedence. However, if for whatever reason a person took out his tefillin before taking out his talis, then he would be required to first put on his tefillin and then put on his talis, which is why you should have them in your bag, not according to gravity, or naturally you'd have the wider thing on the bottom and the narrower thing on top, but rather we have the talis, which is larger on top, with the tefillin underneath. That way, the first thing you reach when you put your hand inside is the talis, and after that you take out the tefillin. And that brings us to section number 3. Today we will speak about the placement of the tefillin and about the order of putting them on as well. Okay, and we'll see how far we go. So as far as the tefillin placement, we'll start with the head and then we will continue with the hands. Okay. It is written, and it shall be, it shall be a sign upon your hand. Now, in Hebrew, the word hand, yadcha, would usually be spelled with 3 letters. But here, instead of it being spelled the regular way, yud dalet chaf, yadcha, it's written with an extra hey. And the rabbis say, why is that extra hey there? It is to teach us that you could actually also split up the word into 2. Instead of reading it as yadcha, which means your hands, the extra hey could allow you to read it as yad keha, which means your weaker hand. From this, we learn that the tefillin are placed on the weaker hand. It's worth mentioning that later we will discuss the law of lefties. And it's actually quite complicated. How do you define what your dominant hand is? It's quite fascinating, different definitions. And we'll revert back to this verse. We'll see there are other sources as well to explain why we put tefillin on. Most people put it on their left hand. But for now, keeping it simple, for the regular right-handed person, the tefillin are placed specifically on the weaker hand. The tefillin should be placed on the elevated part of the muscle, as it is said, place these words of mine upon your heart, which means they should be put opposite the heart. And therefore, you should place the tefillin there and incline it slightly towards the body so that when you bend your arm down, the tefillin will be opposite your heart. So here is my bicep. And when I pull my muscle, the point that's most elevated, that's where the tefillin go. But I don't put it right there. Rather, I turn it in a little bit so that when I move my hand down, I end up having the tefillin directed towards my heart. So since the verse says they should be opposite your heart, that's where you place it, on the place of the arm, where once your hand is resting against your body, they will be pointed directly towards the heart. Although regarding the head tefillin, it says between your eyes, so you might think that the place to put on the head tefillin is right here, middle of your forehead. However, the rabbis learn that it doesn't literally mean between your eyes, rather it means on your heads, directly between your eyes, meaning they should be perfectly centered. Some people carry a little mirror inside of their tefillin bag, so that when they put on their tefillin, they could quickly check to see that the tefillin are straight, because they sometimes tend to slide one way or the other. So why does it say between your eyes, or how do they know it's on your head between your eyes? So this is actually through a process of the Gemara called, where we learn from one sighting to another. There's another thing in the Torah which also is between your eyes. It speaks about the prohibition of when somebody dies on someone, there was a practice where people would cut themselves. And this process of cutting themselves, the verse says, would be done on the head and between the eyes. So there it says it was done on the head and between the eyes. So we know when it says on the head, it means on the head between the eyes, meaning centered. From there, the rabbis learned, similarly with regards to tefillin, when it uses the same terminology between your eyes, it means on your heads, between your eyes. Okay, so that's where the head tefillin are placed. Now, where on the heads? This is something people often are not so perfect with. And the proper place is from where the hair begins to grow, meaning it should sit above your original hairline. And this place extends to the end of the spot where a baby's scalp is soft. So a baby, there's a part where the skull is very soft. Certainly would be dangerous to push there hard, but that's where it's in that area where a person can put on his head tefillin, which means that the lower edge of the tefillin should not be lower than the place where the hair begins to grow, and the upper edge of the tefillin, which is above on the head, should not be higher than the place where the scalp of the baby is soft. Great care must be taken that the tefillin should rest in its proper place, because if you place the head tefillin, even a small part on the forehead, meaning if it's sitting too low, which often happens, it drops, either because people's straps are too loose or because they just slide upwards. The person didn't put it tight, so the knot at the back just slides upwards and the front just slides downwards. So if that happens, then or it's to one side or the other, then not only are you not fulfilling the mitzvah, but you're actually saying Hashem's name, you're saying a blessing in vain, because it isn't the mitzvah. Now, the truth is that even if you put the tefillin on your head for one moment, you've already fulfilled the mitzvah. Even if a person wasn't to say anything, even if they didn't say the Shema. So what some people do is, as they're putting on their tefillin, they kind of move it around a little bit to make sure they kind of have it in the right spot. Because once it's in the perfect spot for one moment, you have fulfilled the mitzvah. However, obviously, if you're keeping the tefillin on you, you don't want to be fooling yourself thinking that you're wearing tefillin when you're not. So therefore, it's good to try to keep track to ensure that the tefillin are located in the right position. That's as far as the box of the front. As far as the knots behind your head, so he says that it should be placed at the back of the head above the nape of the neck, which is the base of the skull where hair grows, which is opposite the face, and it should not incline in either direction, which means that the knot in the back should be perfectly opposite the box in the front. So before you put on the tefillin, you could actually kind of hold it and see, is it evenly distributed between the sides? And where should the knot sit? At the last point where hair grows. Okay. And he says if the box is exceedingly wide, it's hard to get it nice and tight. So therefore, one should be careful about this. So just to summarize, we spoke about the tefillin placement where the hand is placed on the secondary hand, on the bicep towards the heart, and where the head tefillin is placed between the eyes, above the original hairline, below the place that an infant's head pulsates, and the knot should be situated at the lowest part of the hair. So now that we have clear where the tefillin are placed, now let's talk about how to put on the tefillin. That takes us to section number 4. Okay, so here's the process. The tefillin must be put on while standing. It's worth mentioning that there's really a lot of debate in Jewish law if the hand tefillin should be put on sitting or standing. And therefore, Sephardim specifically sit for the hand tefillin and only stand when they put on the head tefillin. And it has to do with the Kabbalistic levels that they correspond to. The level that the hand tefillin corresponds to the position of sitting, and the head tefillin to that of standing. However, others argue that this is a mitzvah where the whole mitzvah must be done standing. And that's the standard Ashkenazi practice, where we stand before we begin to put on tefillin. So we stand, step number 1. Then we remove the hand tefillin out of the bag respectfully, as opposed to picking up the bag and just shaking them out, because that would be disrespectful. Okay, you would think, why would you do that? But if a person's not aware of this, they could just think, why not? You should first put on the hand tefillin, and he doesn't mention it over here, but it's quite worth mentioning that you got to make sure that the hand and head tefillin stay in the right sides, because you don't want to take out the head tefillin before you take out the hand tefillin. You also don't want to take out both tefillin and then start putting on the hand tefillin and then the head tefillin, for a reason we'll discuss soon, because you don't want to take out a mitzvah, not do it right away. So what you do is you only take out the hand tefillin because you've remembered where you keep it in the bag, and you don't take out the head tefillin just yet, and then you put it on. So you put it on, but you don't tighten it. First, you make the bracha, because generally we make a bracha before doing a mitzvah, lahaniach tefillin. Once you've made the bracha, you tighten it, because it says you should tie the tefillin. So really the doing of the mitzvah is when you tighten it. So you kind of have the tefillin on your arm, ready in position. First make the bracha, and then as soon as you have made the bracha, you begin to actually fulfill the mitzvah by actually tightening it, meaning tying it to your hands. Okay, we tighten it, and then you wrap 7 times around the arm. Chabad custom is to actually make a shin, to wrap 3 times around the upper arm. But either way, the main point is you tighten it 7 times around the arm. And then, before putting it onto your fingers, you put on the head tefillin. Again, you take the head tefillin out of the bag respectfully. You put it on your head, but before you tighten it on your head, a second bracha is recited on the head tefillin. Sephardim, as well as the Chabad custom, is actually not to recite the second bracha on the head. So you each follow according to your customs. Okay, so you put it on the head, then you make the bracha, then you tighten it, and then as you tighten the tefillin, he says you should say the verse, Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto L'Olam Va'ed. Blessed is the name of Hashem, whose glory is forever and ever. Now, here's a quick test. Does anybody remember, we mentioned a couple of sections back, this very same verse, that there's a time when a person should say this particular verse, blessed be Hashem's name forever and ever. Does anybody remember? You may need to unmute yourself. Okay, so I'll remind you, it has to do with saying Hashem's name in vain. So we said, if a person by mistake says Hashem's name in vain, let's say they said, oh my, and they said what people often say, the word that follows, which is saying Hashem's name in vain. So we've just disrespected Hashem's name. We now want to make up for it. So since we've just disrespected Hashem's name, therefore we immediately want to show respect to Hashem's name. How do we show respect to Hashem's name? By stating the verse which says, blessed is the name of Hashem forever and ever. Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto L'Olam Va'ed, which is the second little line that comes immediately after we say the Shema. Okay. Now, I mentioned that there are different opinions whether a second blessing needs to be recited on the head tefillin. We'll see soon that there are clearly two separate mitzvahs. Although they're two separate mitzvahs, perhaps one bracha will suffice for both, or perhaps it won't. So some say two blessings, some only say one blessing. Those that say two blessings, after saying the second blessing, immediately say this verse, which we say in case we may have just said Hashem's name in vain. In case this bracha, the second bracha, was unnecessary, we immediately say, blessed is Hashem's name forever and ever. We say this verse, which is to glorify Hashem's name, in case his name was mentioned unnecessarily. Okay. Another point that he mentions is, since there's debate whether the second bracha should be recited, you should say it quietly, so that there isn't a question of whether somebody who hears it should answer Amen or shouldn't answer put Amen. Once you have your head tefillin on tight, meaning you've put it into position, you've made the bracha, you've tightened it, you've said Baruch Shem, then you go back and you wrap the straps around your middle finger 3 times. Now, why do we start with the hands, then go to the head, and then come back to the fingers? Does anybody know? So the reason for this is because wrapping it around the fingers is only a custom. And we don't want to have any interruption, and as we'll learn soon, between putting on the hand tefillin and putting on the head tefillin. So therefore, first we put on the hand tefillin, but we don't yet put it on the fingers, since that's not an absolute requirement. We immediately put it on the head, and afterwards we go back and wrap it around our fingers. It's interesting, we speak about the middle finger, and some may feel a little bit uncomfortable about that wording, but I don't at all, because there's a concept that anything that has potential to be good, anything that has potential for holiness, can also be used for the opposite. So the fact that the middle finger may have negative connotations is precisely because it has positive connotations. So when we speak about the middle of tefillin as middle finger as Jews, we're talking about the added specialty of that tefillin, that it merits to have the tefillin wrapped around it. So to summarize the process of putting on tefillin, we said you stand, you take it out respectfully, just the hand tefillin, you put it on your hand, then you make the bracha, then you tighten it and wrap 7 times, take out the head tefillin respectfully, place it on the head, then you make the bracha if you do, tighten it, and say Baruch Shem, and then wrap the straps around the middle finger 3 times. Okay, so we spoke about the earliest time, we spoke about putting on the tefillin, or where they placed, and we spoke about how they placed. Okay, one final point, it's a rather small halacha, number 4, and we'll conclude with that. So the tefillin must be put on while standing. You should not shake the tefillin out of the bag, because this is, we just did this. Sorry, number 5. Even if you happen to take out the head tefillin first, earlier we said if you take out the talus before the tefillin before the talus, even though it's out of order, you can't leave the tefillin, you got to put them on right away. But if you out of order took the head tefillin out before the hand tefillin, you would still first put on the hand tefillin and then the head tefillin. And the reason for this is because the Torah clearly states the order. It says you should first put it on your hands and then on your head. So that's something that's not negotiable. And so if a person does take out his head tefillin first, even though it's going to be a little bit of an embarrassment to those head tefillin, that he's now putting it aside and getting back to that mitzvah soon, we still need to keep with the order that the Torah has clearly stipulated, which is first the hand tefillin and then the head tefillin. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Rabbi. Have a good night. Cheers,